Have you ever been humiliated just because of your job or the hands you work with? Do you remember the feeling of being looked down upon so much it's like you vanished from the world? Today's story begins in an upscale New York restaurant, where a waitress named Alara is publicly shamed in front of everyone. But what her humiliator doesn't know is that in just a few hours, that same young woman will walk into a boardroom, flip the entire game, and teach them a lesson they'll never forget. Aurelia hides behind an unmarked wooden door, only a thin silk-like glow spilling onto the sidewalk. Inside, the air is refined, the faint scent of white truffle, warm brown butter, freshly ground telekari pepper, whispers wealthy enough to be their own language. Silver clinks softly against white porcelain. Crystal swallows golden lamplight into tiny stars. Everything moves like an orchestra, not polished by discipline, but by the confidence of being above the rest of the city. Alara stands at the edge of that light in a neat black uniform, hair tied low, soft-soled shoes familiar with the paths between carpet edges and chair legs. She reads the room with the instinct of someone who's learned to disappear. The bartender's rhythm as he swaps siphon bottles, the sommelier's wrist flick before an aged vintage, the manager's glance when the night's orbit shifts half a degree. Table 12, a high booth stacked to make its occupants seem to float above the rest, is the center of tonight's motion. Julian Sterling sits there, his skin carrying the refined fatigue of a life lived by meeting schedules and LED lights. Midnight blue tie, a practiced, charming smile, but his eyes hold a cramped shadow. Beside him, Madison Claymore white silk dress hugging just right, a bold love bracelet, nails painted in milk-pure polish that demands a world always clean leans back as if the booth is her throne. Her voice drifts loose in the air, not for anyone to hear, but for everyone to know she's there. Alara approaches with a silver cart draped in linen, a crystal decanter like a frozen raindrop at its center. She tilts the 1,998 Margaux, heavy bottle, broad shoulders, label frayed at the edges, placing it on the night's silk stage like a secret. The wall clock's tick is inaudible, but tonight, everything has its own rhythm. Madison's eyes sweep over Alara. The simple collar line, straight sleeves, unadorned hands. That gaze is a laser slicing top to bottom, pausing on details never listed on a bill. Unpolished cuticles, a scar thin as thread on a knuckle. Her lips curve slightly, a discreet satisfaction, like spotting a typo on an invitation. Alara uncorks the bottle, wipes its neck with a white cloth. The scent of cassis, cedar, and violet unfurls faintly. She tilts the bottle, the first drop for the decanter deep red wine, so clear the light shatters within it. Her hands are steady, balanced like a drawn line. Madison raises a hand, not to take the wine, but to halt the moment. Hands. One word, thin as a razor. Alara pauses. She looks up but doesn't release the bottle's neck. On the silver tray, lamplight ripples across the crystal like waves. She turns her palm down, as hygiene training dictates. Clean. Neat. Labor. Madison leans closer, her eyes cold like someone appraising goods through glass. Nothing to say except to create something to say. She lets out a soft, velvet smooth but sharp as under-oxygenated wine. Julian shifts slightly, a motion of someone wanting to wedge between two colliding forces. But he stops as a small laugh rises from the next table, the laugh of those drunk enough to think they're invisible. Alara continues pouring into the decanter. It could have passed if not for an innocent nudge. The tip of Madison's high heel lightly pushes the cart's auxiliary leg. The force is subtle, but enough to shift a center. The wheel jolts half a beat. The bottle tilts a forbidden degree. A streak of wine spills from the glass's edge. It hits the white silk like a red star crashing into a rainy sky blooming into a dark flower, spreading like it's breathing. A gasp floats across nearby tables, then a silence sinks like someone unplugged the sound. Madison stands straighter, shoulders angled to display the red stain. No need to shout. Her voice carries just enough to reach the whole room. Valentino bespoke. 2 words, like a verdict. No one asks how the table moved on its own. No one asks if the wheel was locked. No one needs context. The manager appears black tie, a pleading smile practiced like a ritual. White cloth, soda water, steady rescue motions. But the red stain has become the story. Alara says, "I'm sorry." Short, precise, no excuses. She feels heat at the back of her neck, not shame, but something standing tall in her chest. Madison tilts her head, her gaze light as dusting off lint. A restaurant like this, she says, laying each word on the table like coins, shouldn't let staff, like that, touch a bottle like that. Julian reaches into his inner pocket, a black card catching the light. He nods to the manager, a gesture to buy silence, to smother a fire with a thick blanket. But the flame isn't in the dress. It's in the eyes of the witnesses. A few sparks of pity, more of relief that it's not them. Ilara pulls the bottle back, adjusts the wheel. Her hands stay steady, her lips don't tremble. She's learned to keep her brow as flat as still water. For 6 months, she's glided through the city's lights like a paid shadow. Madison leans across the private distance, her expensive pear and musk perfume wafting, her smile only for the two of them. "Sweetie," she says, soft enough for eavesdroppers to strain. "In New York, you learn your place in 2 ways, the easy way or the hard way." Ilara doesn't reply, not because she lacks words, but because words aren't needed now. She sets the decanter down, wipes its edge, nods slightly. Her fingers don't grip the bottle's neck, they rest deliberately relaxed. The last autonomy of someone forced center stage. As they leave back straight, heels clicking a victorious rhythm, the sound returns like a river after a stone rolls away. The manager touches Ilara's shoulder, quick enough to seem supportive, light enough to seem uninvolved. "Take a few minutes," he says, in the tone of someone who knows things should vanish behind the curtain. The staff room is small, white-tiled, fluorescent lights flickering. Ilara leans against the wall, cold running from her shoulder blades down her spine like a straight line. A stubborn tear threatens to fall. She catches it with the back of her hand. There's no place for it in this uniform. Her phone buzzes once in her apron pocket. Arthur, a short, no-frills text. 9 a.m. Boardroom. Wolves. Ilara sees her reflection in the stainless steel fridge door. Hair pinned neatly, collar straight, eyes no longer those of the woman who arrived. A thin steel edge shows beneath the fabric. She pulls a simple silver necklace from under her collar, feeling its small weight in her palm, a thing no one here measures in tips. She tucks it back, deeper, then straightens, carrying an empty tray back to the lights and whispers. Passing the foggy hallway mirror, she sees her silhouette slide by like a bolded letter. No one in the dining room will remember her name when they go home, but by morning, those same people in this city will learn another name. At table 12, laughter rises again, higher, softened by wine and the timeless confidence of those never refused. Ilara rests her hand on the cart's edge, feeling the smooth wood under her skin. A thought forms, quiet but firm. The game is still the same, but the players are no longer. Outside, New York slides past the glass like a stream of stars. The wall clock hits 10:42. The gap from now to 9 a.m. feels suddenly sharp as a blade. The night continues, but the story has turned. Dear audience, pause and relax for a moment. Maybe grab a glass of water, then keep listening to this gripping tale. Drop a 1 in the comments if you find this story intriguing. Don't forget to subscribe. The night rolls on, New York outside glowing like an electric vein that never fades. From an alley reeking of old wine and fried garlic behind the restaurant, Ilara steps onto the street, hailing a yellow taxi. The cab glides past, towering steel and glass, reflecting neon lights and flickering billboards. The driver asks for an address, but she gives it by habit. A modest rented apartment in Midtown. A cover. Tonight, she knows she must head north, to Central Park, where a penthouse waits, silent as a patient iron beast. The private elevator lifts her to the top floor, opening into a vast glass-walled space, the city's lights shattering into 1,000 fragments at her feet. A place that once felt distant, now serves as armor against hostile stares. Minimalist decor, cold, white walls silent as accomplices. In the corner, Arthur Kensington waits, tall and lean in a Savile Row suit, a glass of Macallan 25, and a thick stack of files on the table. No long greetings, just a slight nod as a signal. Ilara sheds her thin coat, steps to the table, her hand grazing the cold leather chair. The files open, each page a sharp cut into the mind. Shareholder reports, profit projections, tangled ownership charts, numbers run like a tense score. Each line recalls her parents' legacy, cybersecurity tech, an R and D heart, once the core of advanced cybernetics, now neglected, withered under profit-chasing management. In the golden light, Arthur explains concisely, his voice steady as a hammer's tap. Cybercorp has quietly amassed nearly 18% of shares through shell companies. Harrison Shaw isn't just a financial predator. He's a cold machine dismantling for parts. The Sterling board is split, some wavering, some bought. A no-confidence vote could happen by morning. Ilara flips to the final page, a chart showing EV Capital, the anonymous fund she controls. 15% of shares, a cold but weighty number. With a few allies loyal to her parents, it might be enough to block the takeover. But to do so, she must step out of the shadows. No longer the silent observing waitress. No longer anonymous in rooms of whispers. She leaves the table, walks to the vast glass window where Manhattan's sky stretches wide. The dark embraces the buildings, but light persists in rising. She presses her hand to the cold glass, feeling the city breathe beneath her palm. 6 months of playing a role taught her more than any lecture. She's heard cruel words from those who never thought they'd be remembered. She's seen the gap between makers and takers. Tonight, that farce reached its limit. Ilara turns back. Her steps are firm on the polished wood floor. Her eyes meet Arthur's, no longer trembling. The traces of the waitress fade, replaced by the bearing of an heir ready to reclaim her crown. Arthur slides a slim wooden box toward her, containing a navy Tom Ford suit, black Manolo heels, clothes like a ritual, armor for the fateful morning. She stands still, letting the shift seep into every hair, every breath, then nods. Tonight, she won't sleep. She'll sit with the files, eyes scanning numbers, mind threading clues, heart hardening to steel. When Sterling's boardroom doors open, they won't see a waitress. They'll see Ilara Vance, holder of 15% power, bearer of a legacy to shape the company's future. Outside, a distant church bell tolls 12. The penthouse clock marks the turning point. The night is silent, but dawn won't come gently. All right, dear audience, if you're watching and finding this story gripping, drop a 1 or comment. I'm still here to keep listening. Don't forget to subscribe. Manhattan's morning rises with cold light streaming through glass, turning buildings into silver blades. Sterling Tower stands like a spine in Midtown, its spire piercing the sky. Inside, the elevator hums only with the steady breath of its air system. The 40th floor, dark carpeted, abstract paintings like intentional ink stains. The grand boardroom opens eastward, swallowing the skyline as a backdrop for every decision. Julian arrives earlier than usual. Black coffee, still warm, sits forgotten at the table's edge. He stands by the glass wall, watching windows below flicker on and off like a giant organism's circuits. Inside his chest, his pulse defies any plan. The fatigue of a long night mixes with something like a premonition, thick yet fading. On the table, documents lie in order. Quarterly reports, CFO notes, market analyses. All neat as old report cards, but he knows their contents are hollowing out like marrowless bones. Board members enter one by one, carrying the scent of expensive cologne, weaving through mahogany and leather. Marcus Thorne, silver hair trimmed sharp, takes the chairman's seat, his Mont Blanc pen aligned like a border. Beside him, faces etched with control, crisp white collars, cuffs revealing slim watches. David Chen, COO, nods to Julian, his eyes discreet, having read the fine print others overlook. A chair by the wall waits for a guest observer. Soon, Madison will glide into it, like jewelry placed just right. The pre-meeting air is thick, filled with dry pleasantries like airport lounge crackers. Marcus taps the table once. The agenda rolls out in a steady voice. Outstanding shares, price volatility, defense proposals. Each item passes like ships in fog, brushing but leaving no wake. The door opens. No noise, no warning. A silent slice falls into the room like a pin dropping. Arthur Kensington enters first, his charcoal suit highlighting fine stitching. He moves unhurried. His steps carry the rhythm of someone used to being guessed at. Behind him, a woman in a navy Tom Ford suit, black Manolo heels like twin exclamation points on the carpet. Her hair falls in soft waves over her shoulders, her face calm to the point of cold, but her eyes hold a brightness foreign to this room. No one stands, Not from rudeness, but because muscles haven't caught up with brains. Arthur tilts his head toward Marcus, a gesture sufficient as a resume. The woman places a slim file on the table, taking the empty chair near the center. Her gaze sweeps the room, slow as a spotlight before the curtain rises. Madison is already there, silent as a perfume shadow. She tilts her head, her eyes like glass beads in a mirror, taking in the woman across as an inconvenient coincidence. A faint smile flickers on her lips, a survival reflex of someone who stands tall by cutting others down. But it fades fast, like a finger on a switch. Julian sits up, not quite realizing he's half standing. A chill runs down his spine, not from the air conditioning. He's seen this woman, but not here. Not like this. The image of a silver tray, a bottle's neck, a red wine stain like a blood smear flashes through his mind. Two pictures overlap, one glowing, one singed, and their edges start to align. Arthur lets the woman speak first. She doesn't say much. A nod for a greeting. Two words drop onto the table like heavy pebbles, rippling the still water in glasses. Elara Vance. No title needed. A breath later, Arthur adds the title like a footnote. Executive Representative of EV Capital. Sterling Innovations' second largest shareholder. The 15% isn't spoken, but it passes through minds like a clock striking 12. The room shifts a millimeter. Marcus adjusts his pen. David looks at his paper, then up. Silver-haired men switch crossed legs. No applause, no objections. True reactions are always small. Madison, at the room's edge, leans back slightly, her silk dress rustling thinly, sharp as fishing line. Elara places her hand on the file, her pale nails unpolished. Her voice isn't loud, but it reaches the room's end. She confirms her presence. No permission sought, no justification offered. A short sentence about long-term shareholder value. About a tech foundation being diluted. Each word pins the paper's edge flat. Julian feels a rhythm retreat within him. Not defeat, a yielding. Days ago, he stepped back by habit, avoiding the mess beyond the spotlight. Today, he steps back to see. He sees what he's missed too long. The rule of quiet strength. No noise, no grand gestures. Just the right step. Marcus opens the session. The meeting's opening lines fall like dry leaves. Market reports, cash flow, legal warnings. As the agenda shifts to hostile takeover defenses, the air loosens slightly, the stretch of a breath before a dive. The door opens again, this time with a gust. Harrison Shaw arrives, flanked by three black-suited men with slim briefcases. He enters like it's his own home, his smile tailored for such rooms. Warm enough not to be hated, cold enough not to be dismissed. On his wrist, a gold watch glints like a small eye. No one invites him. He doesn't wait. Papers slide from his briefcase, light as silk, placed near Marcus. The scent of fresh ink mingles with polished wood and leather, a wordless signal. Elara doesn't look up immediately. She turns a note page, clips it with a pin, her motion steady as a driven nail. Madison leans forward slightly, as if the fight's scent has reached her. One eye on Shaw, one on Elara, like tracking two heartbeats on one monitor. Julian stands still, suddenly recalling the silver spoon's clink on porcelain at Aurelia. Sounds different from the pen scratching paper here, and both mark power in their own way. Marcus signals briefly, inviting Shaw to speak. From the glass wall, sunlight dims under a large cloud, the room darkening half a tone. The morning's first lines, the story of power, have written their prelude. Every page turned from here will leave a mark. Elara sets her pencil on the file's edge, aligned with the table. Her gaze lifts, calm as water before the first gust. In the wall-side chair, Madison blinks slowly. At the table's head, Shaw parts his lips, his smile moving like a blade about to leave its sheath. The air tightens into a taut string across the room, one pull away from snapping. The boardroom's air grows thick, as if waiting to see who strikes first. Harrison Shaw flashes a wide smile, the kind worn by someone too accustomed to winning and knowing everyone in the room believes it. He sets his gray folder down, its pages thick as barriers, and scans the mahogany table. He begins, voice smooth, pace deliberate. Shaw doesn't say takeover right away. Instead, he speaks of a brighter future, maximized shareholder value, profit potential. Each sentence lands evenly, like a hammer on a scale. He claims nearly 18% of shares and has swayed some wavering board members. We can't let a great company stagnate under weak leadership, he says, not naming Julian but aiming the blade straight at him. Some members flip through papers, seeking truth in slanted numbers. Marcus Thorne frowns but doesn't interrupt. David Chen glances at Julian, whose knuckles whiten around his pen. No one counters Shaw immediately. That's what he wants. Silent consent. Then Alara looks up. She doesn't raise her voice, just sets her pencil down and taps once. The sound, thin as a pin on crystal, rings through the room. There's an issue, she starts, eyes locking on Marcus before sweeping the room. Shareholder value isn't just in this quarter's numbers or the next. It's in this company's foundation, and that foundation is cracking. She pulls a slim file from her leather case, opens it. No excess words, just internal data. Declining security division revenue, key engineer turnover over 2 years, delayed R&D projects. Her voice stays even, no dramatics, but each figure is a stone thrown into a covered lake. Sterling's chased marketing, neglected labs. We're living off my father's old patents without investing in the next generation. That's the weakness Mr. Shaw sees. A pause. Some faces waver, eyes meeting then darting away. Madison, in the guest row, crosses her arms, her face stiffening, losing its usual smugness. Julian lowers his head, as if each number Alara reads is an accusation aimed at him. Alara presses on, laying the knife bare. I propose reinvesting 25% of net profits into core R&D, starting immediately. Not a flashy initiative, not an ad campaign. It's the only way Sterling survives another decade. Her voice doesn't waver, but steel lies beneath. The board stirs, a third nod, the rest frown, thinking of slashed quarterly dividends. Marcus taps his pen slowly, weighing. Shaw flashes a smile sharp as a honed blade. He doesn't flinch, as if awaiting this moment. Touching, he says, pulling another thick red-stamped file from his case. He slides it to Marcus, hand firm on the cover. But sadly, this discussion isn't valid. I've filed an emergency court order in the Southern District of New York. The court has agreed to suspend all strategic votes until my shareholding is formally reviewed. A cold draft sweeps the room. Marcus opens the file, eyes skimming legal text. Some members crane to read. Shaw leans back, arms crossed, eyes gleaming like a trap sprung. In other words, he concludes, you can't make decisions today, unless you accept my proposal. Julian's hand leaves his pen, palm sweaty. He glances at Alara, a knot rising. Maybe she underestimated the enemy, but Alara's face doesn't shift. She flips her file, places a sheet on top, her finger tracing its edge to anchor it. No extra words. She looks up, eyes cold and bright. The fight isn't over. The vulture just played his legal card, but she knows a bigger gap waits behind. Dear audience, are you still here? Pause, grab a glass of water, and dive back into this gripping tale. Drop a 1 in the comments if you find it intriguing. Don't forget to subscribe. Marcus's hand freezes on the red-stamped pages, his glasses slipping half an inch. On one side of the table, directors whisper, as if the legal charm is a door to escape. Harrison Shaw leans back, fingers tapping the polished table, a confident rhythm of someone who's landed the decisive blow. The room's air solidifies. Julian feels his temples pulse. He doesn't want to believe it, but the evidence is clear, stamps and signatures heavy as a federal court. He glances at Alara, fearing her spark will dim, but she doesn't blink, doesn't shrink. She flips a thin file from Arthur's case, its pages pristine as ice sliding into fire. There's something you overlooked, Mr. Shaw. Alara's voice is even, almost light, but each word hits the mahogany like a gavel. She slides the paper to Marcus, eyes never leaving Harrison. Marcus frowns, skimming the first lines. His breath grows heavy, then stops. Curious directors lean to see, faces shifting from indifference to unease. Alara Vance inherited full rights from her parents in the Vance cybernetics sale 10 years ago. Arthur takes over, his voice low and solid as a pillar, including a special clause, the key IP reversion. If this company is sold, dismantled, or taken by an unauthorized third party, all core patents revert to the Vance Trust immediately. The words land like stone, whispers vanish. Outside, a cloud parts, harsh light hitting the glass wall, exposing paling faces. Shaw sits up, his smile cracking like glass. Absurd, he snaps, voice hoarse. That clause expired when the company merged. Arthur twirls his silver pen, sets it down lightly. Wrong. This contract, filed with the SEC, remains binding until 2030, backed by 2 international law firms. If you want to contest it. He pauses, letting silence do the rest. Go ahead, but you'll lose a decade in court, and your stock value will crumble to dust. Ilara leans forward, eyes piercing Shaw. Meaning, you can buy this company with money, but its technology, its heart, vanishes the moment you sign. You'll hold an empty shell, a soulless husk. Do you really want to pay billions for that? A suffocating silence stretches. Directors once wavering now stare at Shaw, their eyes no longer wary of a predator but cold toward a trapped beast. Shaw forces a smile, but it twists, trembles. He gathers his files, shoving them into his case, the metal clasp snapping like a slap. This game isn't over, he hisses, standing, his lawyers trailing. The door slams behind them, leaving a thick silence. Julian exhales a breath he didn't know he held. His fingers tremble, but he can't look away from Ilara. She shows no triumph, only icy calm, as if she did the obvious. Marcus sets the contract down, his aged hands trembling slightly, then looks at Ilara. His eyes hold unexpected respect. Well then, he says slowly, voice rough, we have one more thing to do. If Shaw's gone, who opened the door for him? Eyes around the table turn inward, probing, suspicious. The room falls silent, as if all oxygen has been sucked out. No more of Marcus's pen taps, no scattered whispers, only eyes circling the mahogany, searching, distrustful. After Shaw's defeat, everyone knows, without an inside hand pulling strings, he wouldn't have gotten this far. Ilara doesn't rush. She flips a thicker second file, pages marked with thin yellow notes. A clip holds her place. She pulls it, sets the file square in the table's center, angled for all to see. No preamble, just numbers glaring coldly. Small, steady transfers through layered accounts, ending in an offshore bank. Arthur leans forward, his voice slicing the silence. Over the past year, these funds left the company as consulting fees. Tracing the shells, we found the endpoint. A Cayman account in the maiden name of a board member's wife. Tension ripples across the table. Ilara's eyes land on a familiar face. Thomas Reed. Thinning silver hair, deep eyes. The man Julian once called Uncle, who stood at his father's funeral, hand on his shoulder like a pillar. Reed slams the table, the wood cracking sharply. Nonsense! You dare smear me with these cheap accusations? I've given 20 years to Sterling. I've sacrificed my life for this company. His voice breaks, half rage, half despair, but his eyes waver like a boat adrift. Ilara doesn't flinch. She slides another sheet to Marcus. Bank statements, dates, numbers, clear. The latest transfer, $2 million, yesterday. Source, a shell company tied to Cybercorp. No escape. Reed stares at the bolded figures, as if willing them to vanish. But they stay, black and cold. Heavy breaths escape surrounding chairs. Colleagues who sat with him through dozens of meetings now avert their eyes, as if his stain might cling to their cuffs. Julian's chest tightens. Reed, who spent hours recounting his father's stories, now trembles before proof of betraying that legacy. A piece of his childhood shatters with the man's reputation. Ilara speaks at last, her voice cracking slightly not from fear, but disappointment. You were my father's friend. You knew he poured his life into those codes, those patents, and you sold them like market goods. You didn't just betray the company, you betrayed his memory. No one defends. Not a cough. Marcus signals security. 2 guards enter quietly, their motions swift. Reed struggles, but his arms are weak, no more than a shadow of the respected man. He's led out, the heavy door slamming behind. In that moment, the room stays silent, but it's the silence after a storm. Everyone knows what happened wasn't just one man's purge, it was lancing a deep rot. A company saved from outside claws now sheds its inner traitor. Alara sits straight, hands on the table, eyes sweeping each face. No more doubt, no more games. Only respect, tinged with caution. She's proven she's not just a shareholder. She holds the company's pulse. Julian takes a deep breath. Shame for his blindness mixes with a faint hope. Alara did what he couldn't. She turned a morning of collapse into proof of rebirth. The boardroom holds the aftershocks of the fall. Empty chairs stand like relics of a bloodless execution. On the table, papers lie open, half-drunk water glasses, the building's glass reflecting tense faces. No one speaks, but all eyes turn to Alara. She sits upright, hands clasped, neither rigid nor relaxed. She doesn't need to raise her voice. Her calm is its own weight. After Shaw's retreat and Reed's exposure, her place is no longer a shadow behind a silver tray. She's the center. But even in this dominance, she knows power isn't just toppling foes. It's choosing who stays. Julian sits across, slightly hunched, as if the room's weight presses his shoulders. His eyes avoid, then return to her. He recalls last night, watching Madison humiliate her in the restaurant, himself silent as an empty chair. That image burns him from within. Now, facing her, he knows silence means no more chances. What happened last night? He begins, voice low but clear in the quiet room. There's no excuse. I didn't do the right thing. Not as a CEO, not as a person. He pauses, eyes meeting hers, bearing unhidden shame. I'm sorry. I know words aren't enough, but I want to make it right, if you'll let me. No sound, but breathing. Marcus tilts his head, David Chen grips his pen. Others stay still, as if the room awaits a verdict. Alara looks at Julian long. Her eyes lack last night's burning anger, now colder, harder to read. She sees a man trembling in regret, but also a potential ally who bows at the right moment. Finally, she nods slightly. An apology is a start, but only actions prove it. Her voice isn't loud, but it cuts through doubt's wall. Sterling is fractured. If you truly want to mend it, from now on, we work together. No more decisions for shiny quarterly reports. No more compromising with complacency. This company needs vision, and the courage to follow it. The word, together, lands like a drumbeat, reaching the back row. Julian exhales, his shoulders straighter, eyes bright for the first time in months. He nods, slow but firm, as if signing a contract without ink. In the corner, Madison, silent until now, clutches her bag. She can't take it anymore. Julian, don't you see? Her voice sours, slicing the silence. She's manipulated us all. You think she's here for the company? No, she's here for revenge. Can't you see it? Julian turns to her, his eyes no longer dodging. They blaze, resolute, as if cutting the last tether. Madison, he says, voice steady. We're done. Leave. The words fall, colder than any accusation. Madison stands, her face twisting briefly, then turns, her heels clicking angrily on the stone floor. The door shuts behind her, leaving an echoing void. Alara doesn't look after her. She turns to the board. Ladies and gentlemen, she says, today we escaped a takeover, but the real challenge begins now. I've proposed reinvesting in R&D, and I'll oversee it with Mr. Sterling. Not in name, but in every specific decision. Marcus nods, his aged eyes glinting with respect. David Chen sits taller, determined. Some directors exchange glances, but none object. The room's air has shifted, from suspicion to acceptance. Julian looks at Alara. For the first time, he sees her not as a rival, not as a shadow of a vast fortune. She's an ally, one who can pull him from the complacency he sank into. And more importantly, he knows she won't go easy. Alara gathers her files, stands. Today's meeting isn't the end, it's the beginning. Her eyes sweep the room, landing on Julian. If we want Sterling to survive, from now on, there's no room for bystanders. The days after the board meeting pass like a whirlwind. Sterling Innovations is no longer a quiet fortress of dull quarterly reports. It becomes a reconstruction site. The once silent R&D floors now glow through the night. Engineers return, whiteboards fill with formulas, servers hum like a reviving heartbeat. They call it the Vance effect, a wave rippling from the boardroom to the halls, from the penthouse to the garage. Alara doesn't take the chairman's seat, doesn't need flashy titles. She walks through labs, stands beside engineers, listens to details of every code line, every blueprint. She knows value lies not in glossy reports but in the raw ideas in overlooked minds. When she pauses at a young engineer's desk, asking about a minor algorithm detail, his stunned, then glowing eyes are the clearest proof. This company has a new heart pumping blood. Julian changes in ways few expect. The man once pristine in glossy ties, used to PR presentations, now rolls up his sleeves, sits with research teams, listens. He's no longer the CEO who just signs and nods. He learns to ask questions, admit mistakes, show respect. Staff who prepared resignation letters stay. Some even bring old colleagues back. Through it all, Alara keeps a professional distance, but her and Julian's synergy spreads through the building. People feel the new rhythm. A fallen CEO learning to stand, a hidden heir learning to lead. They don't need to announce anything. A glance across a meeting table shows the new balance of power. The market reacts fast. When Sterling announces a 5-year R&D reinvestment plan, shares wobble, then surge stronger than before. The press calls it a miraculous comeback, a turnaround few thought possible. Cybercorp, the once hungry rival, loses market share, and Shaw vanishes from the media's spotlight, a predator with broken claws. One evening, 6 months later, on Sterling Tower's rooftop, Manhattan's lights blaze below. Julian stands beside Alara, 2 wine glasses shimmering under the lights. He says softly, "The board approved the plan. The full R&D budget for the next 5 years locked in. We won." Alara turns, her smile faint but deep. "Not won, just begun. My father used to say, build something a decade ahead, and you'll own the present. We've only laid the first brick." They stand silent, looking down at the city. Below are the lights of millions, waiters, engineers, inventors, nameless workers. Alara thinks of her 6 months in an apron, living in their tight shoes. That memory is no longer a wound but a compass. Julian swirls his wine lightly. "Alara," he says, voice low and real, "I don't know if I'm enough to match you, but if you'll allow, I want to keep walking with you." She looks at him, her eyes not those of a mysterious heir or a cold businesswoman, but of someone who's found her place in the world. "You won't walk with me," she replies. "We'll walk side by side." In that moment, no vows are needed, no oaths. Manhattan below them is a map, and they stand high, ready to rewrite it. Night falls on Manhattan, window lights scattering like stars in glass. Today's story ends at the city's highest point, where a woman once scorned for her scarred hands now sits equal with financial titans, reshaping a corporation's fate. But this isn't just Alara Vance's story. It's the story of all of us who've been judged by our outer shell, deemed invisible in the rooms we enter. Alara proved an undeniable truth. True value isn't in a uniform or a title card. It's in grit, resilience, and the courage to stand when the world wants you seated. She turned a night of humiliation into a fateful pivot, pain into strength, and restored faith that even when you're shamed, tomorrow can be the moment you take control. But this journey isn't over. Beyond those glowing glass walls, new rivals wait, new ambitions quietly weave. Can Alara protect her family's legacy against the next waves? And Julian Sterling, after falling and rising, will he have the strength to be a true partner, or will he lose his way again? If this story touched you, leave a comment. Have you ever been underestimated and then proved yourself? Share your story, it might inspire someone else. Don't forget to like, share this video with those who need its message, and subscribe to catch the next chapter. Because somewhere out there, your tomorrow is waiting to be rewritten. "Do you know who I am?" Veronica Langford shouted, her voice echoing through the upscale Michelin-starred restaurant in the heart of Soho. Then, slap! The sound of her hand striking Celeste Williams' cheek rang out like thunder in a clear sky. All eyes turned, the lavish dinner transforming into a silent courtroom. A young, unassuming woman publicly humiliated by one of New York's most powerful figures. But Veronica had no idea that just a few steps away, Daniel Williams was approaching. A self-made millionaire. He would prove that true strength lies not in wealth, but in truth and love. What do you think will happen when the entire room is forced to choose sides? The restaurant fell silent. Celeste Williams sat upright, trying to steady her racing heartbeat. Veronica Langford's icy blue eyes bore into her, as if trying to pierce her soul. No one spoke. but the air was so heavy that even the clinking of cutlery rang out clearly. Celeste's hands trembled, but she didn't back down. She was used to being judged by appearances, but this time the judgment was public, in front of Manhattan's wealthiest and most powerful diners. Veronica raised an eyebrow, her expression a mix of confidence and disdain. "You think you can show up here, dressed like that and talk to me that way?" Her voice cut through the air like a knife. Celeste only smiled faintly, her voice calm as flowing water. "I don't speak to anyone to hurt them, but I also don't stay silent when the truth needs to be said." The room stirred. Some guests whispered to each other. One pulled out a phone, as if to record everything. Another shook their head in contempt. But Celeste remained unshaken. She knew true strength didn't come from money or status, but from confidence and determination. Then, the heavy footsteps of Daniel Williams echoed from the bar. The light caught his vibrant brown hair and charcoal gray business suit, making him the instant center of attention. All eyes turned to Daniel, the self-made millionaire and Celeste's husband. He approached the table, a smile on his lips but eyes sharp as a blade. In seconds, Daniel took in the scene. Veronica trying to dominate his wife, Celeste remaining composed, and the audience waiting to see who would win. "Veronica." Daniel's voice was warm but carried the weight of authority with every word. "Do you know what you're doing?" Veronica turned to him, her eyes flashing with surprise and irritation. You can't interfere, Daniel. This is, she stammered, unable to finish. "No, I'm interfering, and I want everyone to understand one thing," Daniel said, his tone like thunder. "My wife is not someone to be insulted. Not today, not here, and not ever." Celeste gently took Daniel's hand, her eyes silently urging him, "Stay calm. This isn't your fight." She knew her strength didn't lie in shouting or direct confrontation, but in holding her ground amid chaos. Veronica, realizing she was losing the upper hand, pursed her lips and furrowed her brow. A tense stare lingered for a few seconds before she snatched her purse and stormed away from the table, leaving behind a restaurant buzzing with whispers about what had just unfolded. Celeste exhaled, but the peace lasted only a moment. She knew this was just the beginning. In New York's elite circles, no one lets a public victory go unanswered without a price. And for Veronica, her fury would soon turn into a storm. Daniel sat beside his wife, holding her hand tightly. "You okay?" His voice softened, though it still carried a serious edge. "I'm fine," Celeste replied, her smile faint but resolute. "We'll be fine, but tonight won't end with just a slap." A phone buzzed on the table. A text from an anonymous number flashed on Celeste's screen. "You just caught the attention of the whole city, and they won't let you off easily." Celeste looked at Daniel, her eyes gleaming with determination. "They think they can take me down, but they don't know who I am." And in that moment, amid the soft glow of the restaurant, among the murmurs of affluent guests, Celeste realized tonight was the start of a journey where she would prove that truth and resilience are stronger than any credit card or power play. And before we continue with the main story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like the video. Oh, and drop a comment below to let us know where you're watching from. We'd love to hear it. Celeste returned to her mansion that night, where the gentle golden lights bathed every corner of the room, as if preparing for an extraordinary moment. The door closed behind her, and the outside world seemed to pause, giving way to a heavy but potent silence. Veronica Langford had left, leaving an empty space filled with the weight of challenge, judgmental glances, and unspoken disdain. Celeste stood still, feeling each beat of her heart, realizing that the moment at Spago today wasn't just a social clash, it was a turning point from which she could never go back. She ran her hand across her desk, opened her laptop, and fixed her eyes on a long list of connections, events, and networks where Veronica held influence. Each name, each link, each whispered story in high society became a piece of the strategy she began to envision. Celeste didn't seek revenge in a crude way, but in the way only she knew how, using intelligence, patience, and the ability to turn every disadvantage into an opportunity. The next day, Celeste began reviewing every detail of the encounter. The looks, the gestures, the whispers in the restaurant. She recalled them like precious clues. She realized power didn't just come from money or fame, but from the ability to make others misjudge you. If she could control that perception, she could turn the challenge into an advantage. She immediately started building a new network of allies. Philanthropists she'd worked with, old business partners, people affected by Veronica, all were carefully considered by Celeste. She didn't rush to approach them, but observed, analyzed, and chose her timing. Every meeting, every message was a piece in restructuring the world around Veronica the way Celeste wanted. Meanwhile, Adrian watched his wife's transformation quietly. At first, it was concern, then the realization that Celeste was no longer the woman who could be easily subdued. He saw a new strength, a resolute but not vengeful version of her, wielding intelligence over brute force. It made him feel both reassured and immensely proud, knowing the woman before him was not only strong enough to protect herself, but capable of making a profound impact. In the days that followed, Celeste attended social events, but not in her old way. She appeared in elegant yet striking outfits, her sharp eyes observing every detail around her. She didn't need to say much every step. Every gesture sent a message that she wasn't someone to be overlooked or belittled. The scrutinizing glances now turned to curiosity and, in some cases, respect. Celeste felt a new energy, a power that came from knowing who she was and fearing no one's judgment. News of the Spago confrontation spread quickly, creating a wave of attention in high society. People gossiped, doubted, and judged her, but Celeste no longer needed to prove herself. Every step she took was a statement, every action a strategy. She knew that with patience and sharpness, Veronica would pay for her confidence and power not through crude conflict, but by being outmaneuvered by someone clever, patient, and determined. As night fell, Manhattan's lights reflected through the mansion's windows, casting long beams across the floor. Celeste stood gazing outside, feeling the city's pulse mirror her own heartbeat. This wasn't the end, but the beginning. Every mistake, every challenge, every scornful glance became fuel. She was no longer passive, but the one controlling the chessboard, every move deliberate. The transformation from an ordinary millionaire to a subtle, powerful force was underway, and Celeste Williams knew the real game had just begun. Alright, dear audience, if you're watching and finding this story exciting, comment 1 or I'm still here to keep listening. The next morning, the city woke to pale golden sunlight filtering through towering skyscrapers. But in Celeste's mansion, the air was taut as a violin string. She sat at her desk, facing a presentation she'd just finalized, a strategy for investment, partnerships, and business expansion that could turn a small brand into a powerhouse in education and technology. Every number, every projection, every connection was meticulously calculated, without a single error. This was no longer the plan of an underestimated woman, but a declaration of power. Celeste knew the next step would decide everything. She didn't just want to reclaim her reputation or intimidate her detractors. She wanted to prove that intelligence, strategy, and patience could topple old power structures without resorting to brute force. She reached out to partners, sent discreet invitations to strategic investors, those who had doubted Veronica but hadn't yet seen the full picture. Celeste was about to unveil. That afternoon, in a high-end boardroom in the heart of Beverly Hills, Celeste walked in, carrying a quiet but commanding confidence. All eyes turned to her, no longer with doubt or disdain, but with curiosity tinged with surprise. Before the investors, Celeste laid out her plans step by step, explaining in detail how she would combine a nonprofit education platform, interactive online technology, and smart investment funds to create a globally influential network. Every slide, every number, every chart proved she not only understood the market but had the power to make the impossible real. When her presentation ended, the room fell silent for a moment before erupting in applause. No debate or intimidation was needed. Celeste had stepped into the role of a leader, dissolving all prior doubts about her abilities. A few investors once loyal to Veronica quietly switched sides, recognizing that Celeste's opportunities were greater than anything they'd ever seen. As she stepped outside, the afternoon sun lit her hair like a crown for her transformation. News of the meeting spread quickly, and social media, financial articles, and high society reports all buzzed with Celeste Williams' name, the woman who went from being scorned to a symbol of power and influence. Veronica, once untouchable, now faced an opponent she couldn't control, underestimate, or stop. That evening, at a prestigious charity event, Celeste appeared in an elegant black dress, her eyes steady, and her smile calm. The chatter wasn't about doubt anymore. It was about respect, tinged with awe and a hint of fear. She moved through the tables, engaging in conversations without needing much introduction. Her reputation preceded her. Every gesture, every greeting, every glance sent a message. This woman wasn't just strong, she was a game changer. Celeste knew this was only the beginning, but this time, she didn't act on emotion. Every step was calculated, every alliance carefully built. From someone overlooked, she had become the one controlling the chessboard, turning every challenge into opportunity, every doubtful glance into fuel to move forward. As night deepened, the city's lights shimmered like scattered jewels. Celeste stood on her balcony, gazing at the city, her heart pounding with a victory not born of luck, but of patience, preparation, and foresight. From a scorned millionaire, she had become the one who decided, who shaped the world around her. Every conversation, every deal, every glance, now served her vision. Veronica, pushed into a defensive position, could only watch the power shift helplessly. Celeste didn't need to shout or command. She simply acted with precision and let the results speak. She had turned every doubt, every insult, every challenge into strength, building a new empire where power was measured by intelligence, strategy, and the ability to turn challenges into victories. The next day, major newspapers, social media, and financial news all echoed one name: Celeste Williams, the woman who shifted the balance of power, turned challenges into opportunities, and rose from an underestimated millionaire to a revered billionaire. In the quiet of dawn, amid Beverly Hills' relentless rhythm, Celeste stood before a mirror, looking at herself. No longer the small-town girl from Detroit, no longer the one scorned, no longer anyone's shadow. She was a leader, a symbol, an unstoppable force. And in her subtle smile, Celeste knew the world had changed, and she was the one who sparked it. The faint golden light of street lamps reflected through Celeste's office window in Beverly Hills, where she stood before her final strategic map. Every piece, every connection, every number was perfect, no errors, no details overlooked. Veronica Hartwell, once at the pinnacle of power, was now a shadow of the past, but still Celeste's greatest challenge. Celeste no longer feared her. Every decision was based on precise calculation, free of emotion or haste. The next morning, in a private meeting at Los Angeles' financial hub, Celeste entered with a calm but commanding presence. Before investors who once sided with Veronica, she outlined a plan to acquire shares, consolidate investment funds, and restructure brands under Hartwell's influence. Not a single threat, not a mocking smile, just absolute certainty that silenced the room. Every number, every chart proved Celeste didn't just have capability, but the power to turn numbers into reality, leaving Veronica stunned as the news spread. That afternoon, Veronica appeared at an annual entertainment and finance event, but her sharp gaze no longer held sway over the room. Celeste entered, her steps slow but confident, each one a declaration of power. People turned to look, no longer with doubt or curiosity, but with awe and respect. Investors who once doubted Celeste quietly signed deals they had hesitated on before. Veronica realized the game had shifted. Her old alliances, her familiar tactics, all were ineffective against Celeste's flawless strategy. Without direct confrontation, Celeste dismantled her rival with intelligence, planning, and newfound credibility. Every move Veronica made was now under Celeste's precise cold gaze. Late that night, as the event ended, Celeste stood on a balcony, looking down at the twinkling city lights. Her heart swelled with a victory earned not by luck, but by patience, preparation, and the ability to anticipate every move. From a scorned millionaire, she had become the leader, the decider, the one shaping the world around her. The next day, headlines, social media, and economic reports all spoke of one name: Celeste Williams, the woman who redefined power, turned challenges into opportunities, and rose from an underestimated millionaire to a revered billionaire. In the stillness of dawn, amid Beverly Hills' ceaseless rhythm, Celeste stood before a mirror, looking at herself. No longer the small-town girl from Detroit, no longer the one scorned, no longer anyone's shadow. She was a leader, a symbol, an unstoppable force. And in her subtle smile, Celeste knew the world had changed, and she was the one who sparked it. The morning light filtered through the curtains of her vast office on the top floor of a new building, where Celeste Williams sat at a walnut desk, surrounded by strategic maps, financial reports, and ongoing project lists. Gone were the pressures of doubtful gazes, the fears of her early days in the world of power. Now, every number, every decision served her vision, and she knew exactly how each step would ripple outward. Celeste thought back to her journey from Detroit, from working in a cramped apartment on nonprofit projects to her first meetings with Adrian, when everything still felt foreign. Each memory was a brick in the foundation of who she was now. Patient, sharp, intelligent, and never missing an opportunity. Life never hands you what you're not ready to seize, and Celeste knew everything she'd achieved was the result of preparation and determination. Outside her window, the city stirred. Last night's dazzling lights gave way to the soft glow of morning, reflecting off skyscrapers and bustling streets. Every building, every company, every project Celeste led now moved in harmony, like a living organism reflecting the power and influence she'd built. She stood, walking slowly to the window, gazing down at streets she could now hold in the palm of her hand. Everything had changed, but most importantly, Celeste had stayed true to herself. She hadn't changed for power or wealth. She changed for herself, for her vision, and for the values she'd held since her days as a young girl in Detroit. Adrian entered the room, his shirt not quite perfectly pressed, hair still damp from his morning workout. He looked at Celeste with eyes full of respect and warmth. No words were needed, just a glance to know they'd overcome every challenge together. From their uncertain early days to the night Celeste faced Veronica Hartwell without fear. They headed downstairs, where the main office greeted its staff. No shouting, no tension, just quiet respect and admiration. Employees looked at Celeste as a symbol, a guide who would lead them into a new era. She smiled lightly, not to flaunt power, but to remind herself that everything she had, she deserved. The morning meeting began, but the pressure and scrutiny were gone. Celeste presented strategies for international expansion, green technology development, and humanitarian projects she'd long dreamed of. Everyone listened intently, her words perfectly arranged, each decision logical and strategic. When she finished, the room erupted in applause, not out of fear or obligation, but because the woman before them had proven she was not just a billionaire, but a brilliant leader. Back in her private office after the meeting, Celeste sat in an armchair, looking at an old framed photo herself in Detroit, smiling with kids in a literacy program. A sense of peace mixed with pride washed over her. She hadn't forgotten her roots or lost herself in her rise to billionaire status. Everything from the tough days, the challenges with Veronica, to the intricate strategies and calculated moves culminated in this moment. Celeste Williams, from a small-town girl in Detroit to a revered, powerful, and confident billionaire. She stood, stepping onto the balcony. The city sparkled under the early sun, and in her heart, an unshakable belief. She had made a difference, not just for herself, but for the world around her. And for the first time in years, Celeste felt complete free, powerful, and entirely herself. The city below the skyscraper stirred, its rhythm relentless, but Celeste Williams stood on the balcony, watching it all as if it moved to her own beat. The morning breeze swept through her hair, carrying the scent of flowers and city streets, reminding her of the Detroit roads she'd walked. The days she thought life would stay confined to cramped apartments and nonprofit work. Now, everything had changed. From green tech projects rolling out worldwide to charitable funds supporting children's education, from critical business meetings to complex financial strategies, Celeste knew true power wasn't in wealth or mansions, but in the ability to create impact, to turn ideas into reality, and to touch millions of lives. She thought quietly of Adrian, who always believed in her and kept her grounded, even when the world wanted her to change. Every step, every calculated decision, reflected not just her ambition, but the trust he placed in her. And that made her feel she wasn't alone in this journey, that every effort mattered. The day began with meetings, reports, and decisions, but Celeste didn't rush. She moved through the offices, greeting each employee with a gentle but firm smile, letting them know her power wasn't about dominance, but leadership. Every glance her way mixed respect, admiration, and a touch of awe. They knew she wasn't just a boss, but a symbol of determination and finesse. As afternoon fell, Celeste left the office for a conference room where investors awaited. Those who once doubted her now sat silent, listening to every word she spoke. No more skepticism, no more judgments based on appearance or background. Every number, every strategy, every vision proved Celeste wasn't lucky. She was someone who worked, learned, and triumphed over every challenge. When night fell, the city's lights reflected in her eyes, capturing her past, present, and future. She smiled, telling herself the journey was far from over, but she was ready for what lay ahead. No more fear, no more feeling small, just unwavering belief in herself. Back at her penthouse, Celeste stood by the window, gazing at the twinkling streets below. In her heart, a feeling both light and fierce. She had overcome every prejudice, every challenge, from Detroit's streets to the scornful glances at Spago, to become a woman no one dared underestimate. She hadn't just become a billionaire, she was a symbol, a trailblazer, a model of strength, intelligence, and perseverance. And as Celeste stepped onto the balcony once more, breathing deeply in the city's night air, she knew life never stops. Each day brought new challenges, new opportunities to change the world, to lead, to inspire. And in that moment, between light and shadow, Celeste Williams smiled. She had walked through her dream, made it real, and now, she was ready to write the next chapter of her story, a story that would never end. Before dawn, Celeste was at Los Angeles International Airport, where her private jet waited. She didn't need alarms or reminders. Her body and mind were tuned to a relentless rhythm. Luggage neatly packed, documents prepared, but what excited her wasn't contracts or numbers, it was the chance to expand her influence to places she'd never been. Her journey began in Tokyo, where her decisions could shake the global tech market. As the plane took off, Celeste gazed out the window, watching the dazzling city shrink below. She thought of Detroit, where it all started, the cramped apartments, the skeptical looks when she entered the world of wealth. But now, the light of her past, present, and future blended into a feeling both grounded and magical. In Tokyo, things moved faster than expected. Partners, major industry players came to meet her. Celeste was no longer the quiet girl at lavish parties. She was the one setting the pace, shaping strategies, defining trends. Meetings weren't just negotiations. They were stages for her to showcase her capability, authority, and vision. Every eye followed her, part awe, part curiosity, part fear of the mental strength she radiated. But the greatest challenge wasn't numbers or partners. It came from her own limits. Upon landing in Singapore to launch a global education project, Celeste received news of a potential financial risk that could stall millions in progress. Standing in a boardroom, hand on a glass table, she looked out at the glowing city, feeling each heartbeat. No fear, only clarity and resolve. She didn't react rashly. Every decision was weighed, analyzed, and within hours, a plan was in motion. It wasn't perfect, but strong enough to maintain her credibility and influence. Staff looked at her with awe and admiration. Some quietly realized not everyone could stand at the top with such absolute calm. As night fell, Celeste stepped onto the hotel balcony, watching the city lights flicker like an ocean of stars. Her heart beat steadily, now joined by the pulse of unshakable faith and mental strength. She thought of the kids in Detroit, the communities needing opportunity, the projects she led, all reasons she didn't just want wealth, but real change. And then, amid the night and lights, a new idea sparked in her mind. A global project, transcending geographic, linguistic, and cultural barriers, where Celeste's vision could touch every life, from wealthy cities to the poorest villages. She smiled, knowing this would be her greatest challenge yet, but also her chance to prove the only limits were the ones she set for herself. The plane returned at night, carrying her across different skies, and each takeoff and landing reminded Celeste of one truth. Life never stops testing you, but true strength lies in standing firm, turning challenges into opportunities, and expanding influence while staying true to yourself. As the plane's window opened on her final leg, revealing the faint golden lights of the city she'd call home for a few hours, Celeste knew her journey wasn't over. Every step, every decision, every new project was a new chapter, and she, the girl who left Detroit to dream big, was now the one creating opportunities, facing challenges, and changing the world her way. The plane landed, and Celeste stepped off, her eyes blazing not from the lights or fanfare, but from the feeling of nearing her grand goal. She walked through the terminal, collected her luggage, and felt each step echo her long journey from Detroit's narrow streets and cramped apartments to packed boardrooms in Tokyo, Singapore, and Beverly Hills. Outside, the city greeted her with a shimmering night and familiar sounds, but Celeste knew this trip didn't end here. Every decision, every project, every step through airports or boardrooms was a brick in her empire and influence. She was no longer the silent girl, but the one who stood tall, faced challenges head-on, and turned pressure into opportunity. She stepped into the car, feeling the gentle breeze brush her face, a reminder that everything flowed, ever-changing, and opportunities only came to those bold enough to seize them. In the evening's quiet, she smiled, thinking of those who believed in her, the communities awaiting support, and herself, the one who once doubted, once feared, but now stood at the top with unshakable confidence. Celeste knew this journey was never just about money or fame. It was about impact, about changing lives, about making the biggest dreams real. And though the future held unexpected challenges, she was ready. Each step forward would prove the strength, resilience, and intelligence she'd forged over the years. The car moved forward, the city lights fading behind the glass. But in her heart, the light burned bright. Celeste closed her eyes for a moment, took a deep breath, and told herself the only limits were the ones she set for herself. The vast world out there, with all its opportunities and challenges, awaited her, and she wouldn't stop. This was just the start of a new chapter, one she would write with her own strength, determination, and heart.